Hey YouTube, this is Risk Amusement Park fans. Um, this is Amusement Parks 2020 versus 2021. Now, going into the 2020 season, a lot of parks are still basically riding the high horse from 2019. So some parks in January were closing up from the 2019 season. Um, but that excludes parks in Florida, Texas, and California. Now, uh, you go into 2021, most parks are closed at this point, so you only have Texas, Florida, and California that are open. So you get into March when a lot of parks start to reopen again. So, right around the time the pandemic started, a lot of parks were in the midst of opening for the season. So, they either have opened or are getting ready to open. And you know, some parks were just starting their season pass stuff, so they never really had a first official day. So a lot of parks shut back down again, um, and some were in the midst of opening for the season anyway. So a lot of parks thought it'd just be a couple of weeks, and they could reopen again. A couple of weeks turned into a month. Still no word. Um, a month turned into 2 months. So you got into mid to late May. And at the time, with the pandemic still going strong, uh, nobody really knew what to do. Um, Unfortunately, one of the first parks to reopen since the pandemic started was Frontier City in Oklahoma City. They opened right around Memorial Day weekend, I believe. And they were one of the first parks to do so. So, with that wave, over the next month, a lot of parks were slowly starting to reopen. In that mix, two parks that were trying to open was two Cedar Fair parks, Kings Island and Cedar Point. So this is about mid-June at this point, early to mid-June, when they tried to open, and the governor was allowing other businesses to open, such as museums and stuff like that. Well, unfortunately, they did not. For some reason, he did not say amusement parks. So, unfortunately, they sued him to get the rights to open. He agreed to let them open, um, and so they could not open until July. So, the end of June came. Some more parks opened. Um, with limited capacity and stuff like that. July came, some more parks opened, but at this time, certain parks that were trying to open could not. So I'm talking about parks like Six Flags Great America in Illinois, um, all of the Chicago or all of the California parks, um, New England, stuff like that. Even parks like Carowinds, um, they were all trying to open. Unfortunately, they could not due to laws. Now, with Carowinds, they are following the North Carolina system. So, unfortunately, even though they were part North, part South Carolina, they were having to follow the North Carolina side. Um, so, um, August came, they were still doing okay. September came. Toward the end of September, a lot of parks were closing for the season, just due to because of the calendars and stuff like that. Now, also in the end of September, a lot of parks were doing Halloween, scaled back Halloween events. So instead of stuff like Six Flags Fright Fest or Cedar Fair's Halloween Haunt or Universal Studios Halloween Horror Nights, they were doing a scaled back version. So it was kind of like a more family friendly approach to it. Cedar Fair's was tricks and treats. Um, Six Flags had something similar, except they kind of incorporated Fright Fest in a slightly different way. Universal had something. I'm not entirely sure what that was. I know Disney didn't do Mickey's Not So Scary. Um, but um, those turned out to be good moneymakers for those chains. So you go on to Christmas. Now, these parks were still doing all the COVID precautions at this point. Now, now into the Christmas season, a lot of Cedar Fair did not have Kings Island open at that point, so they were closed for the season. Now, there was two parks for the Cedar Fair chain that I'm aware of that were slightly open, and that was Knott's Berry Farm in California and Carowinds, which they were allowed to open. Um, Six Flags Magic Mountain was able to do like a drive-through Christmas event only, um, and I will get to that in a second. But a lot of parks were still did Christmas events, which I am glad they did that. Now, a lot, especially Six Flags, they did stuff which was clever on their part. So when those parks were closed, they still did their holiday in the park stuff, but it was like a drive-through event, which that is a very clever way because you don't really need much staff for something like that, and you can make money at the same time. Now, uh, the only one I don't think was allowed to do that open at all was the one in Illinois. I'm not entirely sure. Now, going into 2021, um, parks were still, unfortunately, in the stint of they're not entirely sure what to do because they still were having all these stuff in place. Um, Now, going into 2021, a lot of parks were still not entirely sure what to do, and they could wouldn't know what to do, so they still open like normal with their calendar set. But what a lot of these parks were not aware of was the amount of people that was coming to these parks every single operating day from the start. A lot of these parks were getting packed, so even some of the more lesser parks for the Six Flags chain, at least that I've heard, were doing these really good numbers. It was probably the same for Cedar Fair as well as other parks. Um, so, um, a lot of these parks opened like normal, and some parks that couldn't open in 2020 opened in 2021. So parks like um, Six Flags Great America in Illinois, Six Flags New England, uh, the California parks, uh, Canada's Wonderland. I'm not sure about LeBron. I think it may have opened. I'm not entirely sure. Um, Six Flags Mexico. All of them were able to open up in 2021 and still doing good numbers. Um, and so throughout the summer, you kept hearing about all these like good numbers for these parks and everything else. I'm not going to go into the small accidents that happened. Um, but now you got into Halloween. Now a lot of these parks announced they're bringing back since before COVID started, Fright Fest, Halloween Haunt, Halloween Horror Nights, Mickey's Not So Scary, uh, local haunts, stuff like that. And those were doing really good numbers as well. And then parks got into Christmas. And from what I can understand, they're doing good numbers as well. So one of the big differences between parks in 2020 and 2021 was, yeah, some parks were not able to open in 2020 because of state laws. But the biggest difference between the a 1 year span is a lot of these parks did good numbers and actually had people come out to support them. And I want that to continue into 2022 and continue to show these parks that they mean something to you.